have you guys been? I've been looking all over for you. I'm Marc Daniel Nelson with MakeMineMusic, and I'm here today to share a little one-step trick to make your mixes a little bit louder, a little bit cleaner, but still retaining most of the dynamics. Now, a lot of people have the struggling, endless journey of trying to see how loud you can make your mixes before they fold up and they start sounding all wadded up and compressed and distorted, pancaked. What I've found is by using two different types of plugins, I can not only monitor what I'm hearing that's clipping, but it's also letting me understand and adjust the clipping going in so I can hear how it's cutting off and limiting. So what that's going to do is allow me to get better transient response. It will be able to not stress the limiter as hard, because what you're trying to do is try to get as much, information, but still retain all of its dynamics, punch, and transient response. And today in the loudness wars, which is still going on, you have to be able to find a way to get it commercially loud, yet still sounding incredibly impactful and punchy. And sometimes just putting a brick wall limiter on it doesn't cut the mustard. Is that what you call it? Doesn't cut the fat. What I'm going to do here is show you how to get the punchy side of the mix while still getting the volume. Now this mix here is, I think, hitting roughly around 8 LUFS, which is plenty loud commercially. But what I'm going to do is activate in the plugin of the limiter an option that lets me hear what it's compressing, limiting, and distorting to get the volume. And obviously, the more you hear that, the more it's distorting. So when you're trying to get it at a commercial level, what happens is you start hitting this area where it's too hard. And sometimes you're like, gosh, I could just use one more clean dB. Just one more clean dB, and I'd be totally happy. But usually you're at the limit. So what this option will allow me to do is hear what it's doing distortion-wise, and then correct that before the limiter with a different clipper. So using a two plugin cocktail, I can choose how to clip into the limiter so the limiter is not working as hard. Let's go into it. The first thing I want to do is pull up the Pro L2. This is my favorite brick wall kind of finalizing limiter. It's pretty transparent. It has pretty great algorithm soundscapes to them. If you go down to style, you can select what you want for per track, per song. For this song, I wanted a punchiness, so I'm going to use the algorithm of punchy. This is a little more transparent than, let's say, aggressive and modern, but a little more punchy than transparent. I can go back to that in a little bit, but first I want to show you what I'm going to do here. So if you hit 1-on-1, it lets you monitor in real time the same volumes if it's bypassed or not, which is a great feature when you're doing kind of level matching and trying to hear what the actual box is doing, or the limiter in this case is doing. To the right of it is this little headphone, and what that does when you engage it, it lets you hear what the limiter is doing, only what it's affecting. So when you see the gain reduction coming down, like on a snare hit, you'll hear the distortion and what the limiter is doing. When you're limiting and you're using the threshold and you keep going higher and higher, what happens is it's starting to work harder and harder and causing all these artifacts. And most of the time you're losing all your transients and all your punch. So what you want to do is retain that. The trick here is to use the listening option and then putting a clipper in front of the plugin of the Fab Filter limiter, and then adjust the clipper to do what I need it to do to adjust what I'm hearing on the limiter, if that makes sense. Let me demonstrate it first. First and foremost, the first thing you can hear is how beautiful all these transients on the percussion and the snare is just It's just this really great sounding, snappy, punchy track. And what happens when you're putting a limiter in line is it kind of pulverizes everything and flattens it. The cool part about this track is you can really hear all the elements that you need to do the trick. Let's just listen to the track one more time, but in this case, I'm going to engage the limiter. Now this is going to be in and out. So we'll play it first to hear what it sounds like with the limiter, and then I'll take it out. But remember, this is 1-1, so we can know that it's level matched. Right away, you can hear the snare losing a little bit of that punchy low mid 200 hertz. The percussion isn't pokey in a beautiful way anymore. Now, it doesn't sound bad, it's just, how do we get it to sound better? Because right now I'm looking at the LUFS and we're hovering around 9. So what does it sound like with off? And then back on. Now again, it doesn't sound bad, it could sound better. So why go for something that's like, oh, that's pretty good, when you know you can get a little bit more? And by a little bit more, we're talking 10%. And my rule is, if you can get 10%, that's still way out of the ballpark. Let's go into this. Let's play the same track and pop in the headphones and hear what actually this limiter is doing. Obviously, you can hear a little bit of the crunchiness of the kick, a lot of the crunchiness of the snare, a little bit of the sax, but if you listen to the snare and the kick, the low end of the kick has a different crunchiness, so you have to pay attention to those things. Now this guy, I have a preset because I like to start in this area, and I know this is a good sounding starting point. But to go over this again, I have another video where I talk about this plugin, but go over it real quickly again. This allows me to clip the signal, hard clip, harder than a brick wall limiter, literally just shaving off at that point. And sometimes that sounds more transparent than any compressor or limiting amplifier. Now, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you're going to listen through the limiter as well. Monitoring it right now is okay to hear what it's doing, but I want to make decisions based off of how the limiter is going, because that's what we're hearing at the final stage. So what I want to do is first set it up, clip it a tiny bit, and watch the transient. So if we watch it, you can see the snare, and it's cutting off, let's say, 30% of the snare. That's pretty aggressive, but for right now, let's start with that. Let's put in the limiter again, take out standard clip, have this headphone engaged so we can hear what the limiter is doing, and then just listen to it. This is without the standard clip. And let's put the standard clip in. Now, the cool thing about this is it's about 50% compared to off. On. Knowing that, that means that we're pulling the clipping down enough that it's actually letting the limiter breathe a little bit more. So this is just the limiter. put in the standard clip. Go back and listen to it with just the distortion on so we can hear what it's doing. This is without. With. The other cool part about the standard clip is it's actually adding a little more dense punchiness to the mix. I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Loudness wars came about because you're competing against other things, usually on the radio or anything that will come after the song that you're playing. So you want it obviously loud over your car stereo so you can hear it over the road and stuff. But what it's doing is obviously pulverizing your entire dynamic range and adding artifacts that we've all become used to now, but not necessarily favoring. Luckily, with streaming and stuff, we've been able to bring down levels and stuff, but still putting a limiter on and going after negative 14 LUFS and stuff. You're going to fight some of that transient kind of distortion by pushing it too high up. What this allows me to do is show you an example of pushing a pretty loud mix at negative 8 LUFS and showing you roughly 50% difference between the two, allowing me to get just a little bit more sauce out of it. As Doug Sachs used to call it, a little more cheese out of it, without hearing the cheese. So, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, and have a great time mixing.